My name is Eleanor, and at 65 years old, I've worked 3 jobs to put my son Marcus through medical school. After all those years of sacrifice, I stood frozen in shock at his graduation when he introduced another woman as his mother. "This is my mom, the woman responsible for who I am today," he said proudly to his friends. The air left my lungs as he glanced my way and called me a family friend. But what I did next left everyone in stunned silence. If you're watching this, let me know where you're from in the comments and hit that subscribe button as I share how I reclaimed my dignity that day. I grew up in a small town in Michigan where dreams stayed small and practical. My father worked at the local factory, and my mother cleaned houses for the wealthier families in the neighboring county. We weren't poor by local standards, but there wasn't money for college or travels beyond the state line. I graduated high school with decent grades but no clear path forward except marriage and family. At 22, I met Thomas at the diner where I waitressed. He was handsome, with a charming smile and big plans to start his own business. 6 months after our first date, we married in the local church with a small reception in my parents' backyard. Those first 2 years were happy ones. We rented a small house near the lake, and Thomas found steady work as a salesman at a furniture store while developing plans for his own shop. When I discovered I was pregnant, we were overjoyed. Thomas painted the spare bedroom pale blue and yellow, not wanting to commit to one color until we knew if we were having a boy or girl. When Marcus was born on a snowy January morning in 1980, Thomas cried holding him. "He's perfect, Ellie," he whispered. "We made something perfect." But something changed in Thomas after Marcus arrived. The sleepless nights seemed to affect him more deeply than me. He started drinking more regularly, coming home later from work. His mood swung from excessively affectionate to irritable and distant. When I asked about the business plans, he'd snap that I didn't understand the pressures he was under. By Marcus's 2nd birthday, Thomas was often gone on weekends, claiming work obligations. Money grew tighter as his sales commissions decreased. I picked up extra shifts at the diner, leaving Marcus with my mother while I worked. When Marcus was 4, I came home from an evening shift to find Thomas packing a suitcase. "I can't do this anymore, Eleanor," he said without looking at me. "This life, it's suffocating me." I begged him to reconsider, to think about Marcus, to try counseling. But his mind was made up. He left that night in our only car, leaving behind nothing but a note promising to send money when he could. We received 2 checks over the next 6 months, then nothing. No calls, no letters, no birthday cards for Marcus. It was as if Thomas Burton had vanished from the earth. Telling Marcus that his daddy wasn't coming home was the hardest thing I'd ever done. His little face crumpled in confusion, then anger, then a sad acceptance that broke my heart. "It's okay, Mommy," he said, patting my hand with his small fingers. "We can be okay, just us." And somehow we were. I took on more shifts at the diner, plus weekend house cleaning jobs like my mother had done. We moved to a smaller apartment closer to town, so I could walk to work when needed. My parents helped when they could, but they were aging and had their own financial concerns. Despite our struggles, Marcus thrived. He was reading before kindergarten, bringing home perfect spelling tests and math papers with gold stars. His teachers commented on his curiosity and eagerness to learn. I made sure there were always library books in our home, and spent my rare free time taking him to the park or local museums on their free admission days. We developed small rituals that bonded us. Saturday morning pancakes shaped like animals, bedtime stories where we'd take turns making up adventures, Sunday afternoon walks where we'd collect interesting rocks or leaves. Money was always tight, but Marcus never seemed to notice or mind. "You make the best dinners, Mom," he'd say over simple pasta dishes or bean soup. When Marcus started middle school, his academic abilities became even more apparent. His science teacher called me in for a conference, not because of problems but to tell me Marcus showed unusual aptitude. "He's gifted, Mrs. Burton. He should be thinking about advanced programs for high school, maybe even college scholarships eventually." That conversation lit a fire in me. My son had potential beyond anything I'd imagined for myself. I took on a 3rd job, night reception at a local motel, so we could move to a better school district with more advanced programs. The new apartment was barely larger than our old one but came with access to Westside High School, known for its college preparation and science programs. The move meant I saw Marcus less. I'd leave for the diner before he woke up, catch a few hours of sleep in the afternoon, be home to make dinner, then head to the motel for the overnight shift. But seeing him flourish made every exhausting hour worthwhile. He joined the science club, the debate team began talking about becoming a doctor. Dreams that seemed impossible given our circumstances, but I was determined not to let money stand in his way. We'll figure it out, I promised when he worried about college costs. You just keep getting those A's, and I'll handle the rest. I had no idea how I'd fulfill that promise, but I knew I'd work until my hands bled if necessary to give him the opportunities one never had. Marcus blossomed at Westside High. By sophomore year, he was taking all honors classes and staying after school for science competitions and debate tournaments. I rearranged my work schedule whenever possible to attend his events, sitting proudly in the audience, even when I didn't fully understand the complex topics he discussed with such confidence. Junior year brought talk of college applications and SAT prep. The guidance counselor recommended a prep course that cost $500. Money we simply didn't have in our budget. I sold my mother's pearl necklace, the only valuable thing I owned, to pay for it. Marcus scored in the top percentile on both attempts, opening doors to universities I'd only seen in movies. Senior year, Marcus was named valedictorian. I sat in the audience at graduation, exhausted from working a double shift but bursting with pride as he delivered a speech about perseverance and ambition. Behind every success story is someone who believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself, he said, catching my eye in the crowd. I thought my heart might burst with love. College decision letters arrived in a flurry that spring. Marcus had been accepted to several prestigious universities, all with partial scholarships, but none covering the full cost. We spread the financial aid packages across our kitchen table, calculating and recalculating. I should just go to state, Marcus said, pushing away the letter from Edgewater University, his dream school known for its pre-med program. The scholarship covers almost everything there. No, I said firmly. Edgewater is where you belong. They're offering a good scholarship, and we'll figure out the rest. But Mom, it's still almost $20,000 a year after the scholarship. Where would we ever get that kind of money? I didn't have an answer that night, but by morning, I had a plan. I approached Mr. Jenkins at the diner about becoming assistant manager, negotiated more houses to clean on weekends, and applied for a better-paying night position at the nursing home instead of the motel. Together, the 3 jobs would just cover Marcus's tuition and basic expenses, if I continued living frugally in our small apartment. Marcus left for Edgewater that fall, the first person in our family to attend college. I drove him in my aging Honda, helping set up his half of the dormitory room, noticing how shabby his belongings looked next to his roommate's expensive electronics and designer bedding. Don't worry about it, Marcus assured me, seeing my concern. Nobody cares about that stuff. But when I called him the following week, I could hear a new tension in his voice. He talked about his coursework but skimmed over questions about friends or social activities. By Thanksgiving, when he returned home, subtle changes were evident. His speech pattern had shifted slightly, adopting the more formal cadence of his professors. He had new clothes I hadn't sent money for, explained vaguely as gifts from friends. During that break, I noticed Marcus looking around our apartment with new eyes, noticing the worn furniture, the water stain on the ceiling, the mismatched dishes. Things he'd never seemed to see before. He spent most of the break studying in his room or at the library, saying he needed to prepare for finals. When he returned for spring break, Marcus announced he'd been invited to spend most of the week at Professor Diane Lawson's lake house with several other promising students for an academic retreat. She's amazing, Mom, he explained, eyes bright with admiration. She's on all these research boards and knows everyone in the medical community. Her husband is a neurosurgeon at Riverside Hospital. I swallowed my disappointment at losing most of his break time and focused on his excitement. That sounds like a wonderful opportunity, sweetheart. From that point, Professor Lawson's name peppered our conversations. She'd recommended Marcus for a summer research position. She'd introduced him to important medical school connections. She'd invited him to cultural events in the city. By sophomore year, Marcus spent most holidays and breaks at the Lawsons' home or accompanying them to academic events. When he did visit me, our conversations grew increasingly strained. He commented on my outdated views or limited perspective, phrases that felt borrowed from someone else's vocabulary. "You're working too hard, Mom," he said during one visit, watching me massage my swollen feet after a double shift. But when I mentioned cutting back on the money I sent him, he quickly backtracked. No, I need that for the meal plan and books. I just mean maybe you should find easier jobs." Junior year brought discussions of medical school applications. The costs were staggering. Application fees alone would run into thousands of dollars. I refinanced our small apartment, taking out equity I'd built up over years of payments, to create a fund for his applications. "You're applying to Langston Medical, right?" I asked, mentioning the school affiliated with our state university. "Excellent, but more affordable than others." "I suppose," Marcus said dismissively. "But Professor Lawson thinks I should aim higher. She says with my grades and her recommendations, I could get into Whitmore or Benton. Both were prestigious private medical schools with tuition costs that made me dizzy to contemplate. But I nodded encouragingly, not wanting to dampen his ambitions. When Marcus called to announce his acceptance to Whitmore Medical School, I cried with mixed emotions. Immense pride in his achievement and paralyzing fear about the financial implications. Even with the partial scholarship they offered, the costs were astronomical. "Professor Lawson says it's worth every penny," Marcus assured me. "She says Whitmore graduates get the best residencies and career opportunities." I took a deep breath and promised to make it work. That week, I applied for a third shift at the nursing home, volunteering for the overnight shift nobody wanted. Between the diner, house cleaning, and 2 nursing home shifts, I would be working nearly 80 hours per week, but the math finally worked out. "You don't need to send me quite as much," Marcus said when I explained the plan. "Professor Lawson mentioned some additional scholarship opportunities she can help me apply for." I felt a flash of resentment that this woman I'd never met was taking on roles that should have been mine, but pushed it aside. If she could help Marcus, I should be grateful, not jealous. As Marcus began medical school, our communications grew more sporadic. What had been weekly phone calls became monthly, then occasional texts. When he did call, he spoke primarily about his studies, his research opportunities, and increasingly about Professor Lawson and her husband. "Diane took me to the symphony last weekend," he mentioned casually in one call. The first-name basis caught me off guard.
"Professor Lawson," he corrected gently.
"No, she insists I call her Diane now. She says we're colleagues, not just teacher and student anymore." During his rare visits home, I noticed more pronounced changes. His wardrobe now consisted of expensive-looking clothes I couldn't have afforded. He wore a watch I didn't recognize, later learning it was a gift from Dr. Lawson, Diane's husband. He turned down my offers to cook his favorite meals, saying his palate had evolved during dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants with the Lawsons. Our conversations became minefields. I'd ask about his studies, genuinely interested, only to be told the concepts were probably too complex to explain. I'd share news about people from our hometown, and he'd sigh with thinly veiled boredom. When I mentioned my jobs, he'd change the subject quickly, as if my work embarrassed him. The argument started in his second year of medical school. Marcus claimed I was sending more money than necessary, that I should stop martyring myself. When I explained the money was for his education and living expenses, he accused me of using financial support to control him. "The Lawsons say you're being manipulative," he said during one heated exchange. "Diane says parents sometimes use money as emotional leverage." I was stunned into silence. This woman was analyzing my relationship with my son, offering judgments about motivations she couldn't possibly understand. "Marcus," I said carefully, "I've worked these jobs so you can become a doctor. That's all. There are no strings attached." He left early that visit, saying he'd promised to meet the Lawsons at their vacation home for the remainder of the break. My physical health began declining that year. Working nearly 80 hours weekly for years had taken its toll. My knees ached constantly from standing at the diner. My back spasmed from lifting residents at the nursing home. I developed a persistent cough that I attributed to exhaustion, but couldn't seem to shake. I mentioned none of this in my communications with Marcus, not wanting to worry him during his intense studies. Instead, I continued sending monthly wire transfers for his expenses, writing cheerful emails about mundane happenings in my life, and sending care packages of homemade cookies and snacks that often went unacknowledged. In his third year, Marcus stopped coming home altogether. Thanksgiving, Christmas, even summer breaks were spent with the Lawsons at medical conferences or on trips I learned about through social media rather than direct communication. "The Lawsons are taking me to their cottage in Vermont for Christmas," he texted 3 days before the holiday. "Diane thinks the networking opportunities will be valuable." I spent that Christmas working a double shift at the nursing home, volunteering so other staff could be with their families. The extra pay helped cover a textbook Marcus needed for his next semester. In February, I collapsed during my shift at the nursing home. The diagnosis was pneumonia, exacerbated by exhaustion and a weakened immune system. I was hospitalized for 9 days, reluctantly allowing my supervisor to call Marcus after the 3rd day. He sent a text expressing concern but explained he couldn't visit because of an important exam coming up. I understood medical school was demanding, and I'd always taught him that education came first. What I hadn't expected was the elaborate flower arrangement that arrived at the hospital with a card reading, "Wishing you a speedy recovery. Marcus speaks so highly of you. Warm regards, Diane and Robert Lawson." The phrasing struck me as odd. "Speaks so highly of you." As if I were a former teacher or distant relative, not the woman who had given birth to him and raised him alone. After my discharge, I returned to work against medical advice, unable to afford losing income. My supervisor at the nursing home reduced my hours temporarily, insisting I take time to recover. The resulting financial shortfall meant delaying payment on utility bills and cutting back on groceries, but I still managed to send Marcus his monthly allowance on time. Around this period, I discovered through social media that Marcus regularly referred to Diane as his mentor. Photos showed them at medical conferences, museum openings, and dinners at the Lawsons' home. In every image they stood close, her hand often resting on his shoulder in a maternal gesture that sent a pang through my heart. Comments under these photos referred to their special bond, and how Diane had taken Marcus under her wing. I tried to dismiss my growing unease. Mentorship was important in professional development. If this relationship helped Marcus's career, I should be grateful, not resentful. When Marcus began his final year of medical school, thoughts of his graduation sustained me through increasingly difficult workdays. I imagined standing proudly as he received his medical degree, all the years of sacrifice culminating in that moment. I began saving for a new dress and shoes for the ceremony, setting aside a small amount from each paycheck. When I broached the subject of graduation, Marcus seemed hesitant. "It's really just a formal ceremony, Mom." Not very exciting to watch. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I insisted. "I've been looking forward to this day since you first mentioned wanting to become a doctor." He relented with obvious reluctance. "Fine if you want to come. I'll put you on the list for a ticket, but it's going to be crowded, and I'll be busy with classmates and professors afterward." "I understand," I said, swallowing my hurt at his tone. "I just want to see you receive your diploma. The Lawsons are hosting a reception afterward," he added. "Diane has invited several hospital directors and department heads who might have residency positions available." "That's wonderful," I replied, though the implied exclusion was clear. I wasn't invited to this reception. As graduation approached, I purchased a navy blue dress on sale and comfortable but dressy shoes for the ceremony. I had my hair styled at the local beauty school where services were discounted. I wanted Marcus to feel proud to introduce me to his professors and friends, even if I couldn't offer professional connections like Diane Lawson. The routine of my life during Marcus's medical school years could be measured in clock punches and wire transfers. I worked the morning shift at the diner from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., came home for a brief rest, then worked either housecleaning jobs or a shift at the nursing home from 4 p.m. until midnight. 3 days a week, I also covered the overnight shift at the nursing home, catching sleep in short bursts during the day. Each month, I calculated expenses with mathematical precision. Rent, utilities, minimal groceries, bus fare to work when the weather was too bad to walk, and the occasional prescription for my worsening cough came first. Everything remaining went into a wire transfer to Marcus on the first of the month. The physical toll of this schedule was significant. By the second year of Marcus's medical training, I had developed arthritis in my hands from years of waitressing and cleaning. My chronic cough had evolved into what the free clinic doctor suspected was COPD, though I couldn't afford the tests to confirm it. I took over-the-counter medications to manage symptoms and continued working, ignoring the concerned looks from coworkers when breathing became difficult during more strenuous tasks. Phone calls from Marcus grew increasingly rare and formal. Our conversations followed a pattern: brief inquiries about my health, which I always answered positively regardless of truth, short updates on his classes, and inevitably, some mention of the Lawsons. Diane thinks my research paper could be published in the Journal of Experimental Medicine. Robert introduced me to the head of neurosurgery at Massachusetts General. The Lawsons took me to the opera last weekend. Diane says understanding the arts makes for more well-rounded physicians. I clung to these conversations despite their growing formality, treasuring any connection to the son who seemed to be drifting into a world I couldn't access. I kept a journal of his accomplishments, recording each achievement with pride, even when they came packaged in references to Diane's guidance. During Marcus's second year of medical school, he called with news that should have been celebratory. "I've been selected for a specialized research track," he explained. "Only 3 students were chosen." "That's wonderful," I exclaimed. "I'm so proud of you." There was a pause before he continued. "It means I won't be able to come home for summer break. I'll be working in the research lab with Dr. Abernathy. Diane recommended me specifically for the position." "I understand," I said, swallowing my disappointment. "Will you be able to come for a weekend maybe? Even just a day?" "I don't think so, Mom. The program is very intensive." Diane says it could be crucial for my residency applications. Christmas that year brought a card from Marcus with a generic holiday message and a hastily scrawled signature. Inside was a note explaining he'd be spending the holiday with the Lawsons at their ski lodge in Vermont, where several important medical professionals would also be visiting. I placed the card on my small artificial tree and worked both Christmas Eve and Christmas Day at the nursing home, reading holiday stories to elderly residents whose families hadn't visited. In odd moments, I found myself wondering if Diane Lawson prepared the same honey-glazed ham and cinnamon rolls I'd made every Christmas morning of Marcus's childhood. The collapse came during my 3rd consecutive overnight shift in February. I had been fighting what I thought was a severe cold for weeks, taking over-the-counter medicine, and pushing through increasing fatigue and chest pain. While helping transfer a resident from wheelchair to bed, my vision suddenly tunneled, and I woke up in the emergency room with pneumonia and severe exhaustion. The nursing supervisor called Marcus against my protests. He texted his concern but explained he was in the middle of an important research project and couldn't get away. I assured him I was fine and not to worry. 3 days into my hospital stay, the elaborate flower arrangement arrived from the Lawsons. The card with its formal message, "Marcus speaks so highly of you," sat on my bedside table throughout my 9-day hospitalization. Nurses assumed the flowers were from family and commented on how beautiful they were. I didn't correct their assumptions. During that hospital stay, a social worker visited to discuss my situation. Seeing my work schedule and financial circumstances, she gently suggested I might qualify for assistance programs.
Infine insisted.
"My son is finishing medical school this year. Things will be easier then." She gave me a skeptical look. "And will he be helping you financially at that point?" The question caught me off guard. I had never considered that scenario. All these years, the financial support had flowed in one direction only. "He'll be starting his residency," I explained. "That's an intense time. I wouldn't want to burden him." The social worker left her card, which I tucked away and never used. But her question lingered in my mind during the quiet hours of my recovery. What did I expect would change after Marcus's graduation? Had I unconsciously been waiting for some form of reciprocity, some acknowledgement of the sacrifices made? After discharge, I returned to work against medical advice, unable to afford a longer recovery period. My supervisor at the nursing home reduced my hours temporarily, insisting I take time to recover. The resulting financial shortfall meant delaying payment on utility bills and cutting back on groceries, but I still managed to send Marcus his monthly allowance on time. It was during this period of recuperation, with slightly more free time than usual, that I discovered through social media how Marcus presented his life to the world. On the rare occasions I checked Facebook, I found photos of him at medical conferences, museum openings, and dinners at the Lawsons' home. In every image, Diane stood close beside him, her hand often resting on his shoulder in a maternal gesture that sent a pang through my heart. Comments under these photos referred to their special bond, and how Diane had taken Marcus under her wing. In one post about a challenging exam period, Marcus had written, "Couldn't have gotten through this without Dr. Lawson's guidance and support. Some mentors are truly like family." The words stung more than they should have. I closed the laptop and didn't check social media again for months. As Marcus's final year of medical school progressed, thoughts of his graduation sustained me through increasingly difficult workdays. I imagined standing proudly as he received his medical degree, all the years of sacrifice culminating in that moment of achievement. I began saving for a new dress and shoes for the ceremony, setting aside a small amount from each paycheck. The navy blue dress I eventually purchased was on sale but looked more expensive than it was. The shoes were practical but dressy enough for the occasion. I had my hair styled at the local beauty school where services were discounted. When graduation invitations were sent out, Marcus called to confirm I'd be attending. His tone remained reluctant, but I chose to focus on the positive. In 2 months, I would see my son become Dr. Marcus Burton. No matter what happened afterward, no one could take away my contribution to that achievement. "The ceremony starts at 10, he explained, "but seating begins at 9, and it might be hard to find parking. I'll be there early," I promised. I wouldn't miss it for anything. "Just so you know, there's a reception afterward that the Lawsons are hosting. They've invited several hospital directors and department heads, people who might have residency positions available." The implied exclusion was clear, but I chose not to address it. "That sounds like a wonderful opportunity for you." Yes, Diane has really gone all out. She says this could determine the entire trajectory of my career. After hanging up, I sat quietly in my small living room, contemplating the years of sacrifice that had led to this moment. Whatever happened at graduation, I would hold my head high. I had done everything possible to give Marcus the opportunities one never had. If he couldn't acknowledge that publicly, it didn't diminish the truth of what I had contributed. The morning of Marcus's graduation dawned clear and bright. I had requested the day off from all 3 jobs months in advance, the first full day off I'd taken in years. I woke before my alarm, too excited and nervous to sleep. My preparations were methodical. I showered using the special vanilla-scented soap I saved for important occasions, applied makeup with careful precision, and styled my hair the way the beauty school student had shown me. The navy dress fit well, skimming over the weight I'd gained during my illness. The new shoes pinched slightly but looked appropriate for the ceremony. In my small clutch purse I placed Marcus's graduation gift, my father's watch, the only valuable item left from my parents. Dad had worn it to church every Sunday until his death 10 years earlier. I'd had it cleaned and serviced, spending money I couldn't really spare, but wanting to give Marcus something meaningful. The bus ride to Whitmore Medical School took nearly an hour. I arrived at the auditorium 90 minutes before the ceremony, clutching my invitation and ID as instructed. Ushers directed family members to assigned seating sections. I found my seat near the middle of the auditorium, not close enough to see facial expressions on stage, but with a clear view of the area where graduates would receive their diplomas. Around me, families chatted excitedly, many dressed in expensive clothes and jewelry that made my carefully chosen outfit seem shabby by comparison. I overheard discussions of vacation homes, European trips, and the prestigious residencies awaiting their graduating children. I sat quietly, hands folded in my lap, observing the increasingly crowded auditorium. I hadn't expected to see Marcus before the ceremony, knowing he would be busy with pre-graduation preparations. Still, I found myself scanning the groups of people entering, hoping for a glimpse of my son. The ceremony began precisely at 10. The Dean of Medicine spoke about the responsibilities and privileges of becoming a physician. A renowned surgeon delivered the commencement address, discussing the rapidly changing landscape of medicine and the importance of maintaining humanity in an increasingly technological field. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for, the conferring of degrees. I sat straighter in my seat as students began crossing the stage alphabetically. Burton would be early in the sequence. When Marcus's name was called, my chest tightened with emotion. He looked so handsome in his doctoral regalia, confident as he strode across the stage to receive his diploma. I fumbled for my cell phone, managing to snap a blurry photo as he shook the dean's hand. Tears blurred my vision, but I blinked them away, not wanting to miss a second. "Dr. Marcus Burton," the announcer said, and a small cheer went up from somewhere in the audience. Likely friends of his I'd never met. I clapped until my hands hurt, pride overwhelming me completely. The remainder of the ceremony passed in a blur. After the final graduate received their diploma, the new doctors were asked to stand and recite the Hippocratic Oath together. Seeing Marcus among them, solemnly pledging to uphold the highest standards of medicine, was a moment I knew I would treasure forever. After the ceremony concluded, families flooded the reception area and adjoining courtyard. I made my way through the crowds, scanning for Marcus's tall figure among the sea of identical black gowns. The crush of people made movement difficult, and several times I was jostled by groups moving in the opposite direction. Finally, I spotted him near a fountain in the courtyard, surrounded by a group of well-dressed people. I recognized Diane Lawson immediately from social media photos, an elegant woman in her 50s with perfectly styled silver blonde hair and an expensive-looking cream suit. Beside her stood a distinguished man I assumed was her husband, Dr. Robert Lawson. I approached slowly, suddenly nervous. Marcus hadn't seen me yet, engaged in animated conversation with a gray-haired man who was listening intently to whatever my son was saying. I paused a few feet away, waiting for a natural break in the conversation before interrupting. That's when I heard it. "And who is this lovely woman who's been such an influence on you, Marcus?" asked an elegantly dressed woman in the group. Marcus placed his arm around Diane Lawson's shoulders, his face glowing with admiration. "This is my mom, the woman responsible for who I am today. I wouldn't be standing here as a doctor without her guidance and support." The world seemed to stop spinning. I stood frozen, the gift clutched in my suddenly cold hands, as Diane smiled warmly at the group. "We couldn't be prouder of him," she responded, her husband nodding in agreement beside her. Marcus continued. "Diane recognized my potential from my first year of undergrad. She's been guiding my educational and career decisions ever since." I must have made some small sound because Marcus suddenly looked up and saw me standing there. A flash of something, guilt? Annoyance? Crossed his face before he composed his expression. "Oh, Eleanor," he said, the use of my first name like a slap. "Everyone, this is Eleanor, a family friend who came to see the ceremony." The group turned to look at me with polite but disinterested expressions. One woman murmured, "How nice," before turning back to the conversation. Diane Lawson's eyes met mine briefly, a flicker of something like triumph in them before she turned her attention back to the group. Marcus stepped away from the circle, taking my elbow and guiding me several feet away. "I didn't think you'd come over here," he said in a low voice. "I mentioned there would be important contacts at this reception." I struggled to find my voice, my throat constricted with hurt. "You called me a family friend," I finally managed to say. He glanced nervously back at the group. "Look, these people are department heads and hospital administrators. They're vital for my career. Diane has spent years cultivating these relationships for me. And I've spent years working 3 jobs to put you through school," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Marcus ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "You wouldn't understand, Mom. This is a different world. These people come from medical dynasties and academic families. They have connections and sophistication that can open doors. I need to fit into their world now." "By denying your mother?" The words came out more sharply than I intended. "I'm not denying you," he hissed, checking again to make sure no one could overhear. "I'm just presenting myself in the most advantageous light. Diane understands the medical community. She knows what impresses these people, and it's not." He trailed off, but his glance at my discount store dress completed the sentence. "It's not you. It's not where we came from. It's not what we are." In that moment, something shifted inside me. The hurt remained, a physical ache in my chest, but alongside it rose a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I looked at my son, this stranger in doctoral regalia who spoke like someone I didn't recognize, and saw the situation with sudden, painful clarity. "I see," I said quietly. "You should return to your guests. They're waiting." Relief crossed his face. "Yes, I should. We can talk later, okay? Maybe tomorrow before you head back." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further. Marcus gave an awkward half-wave before returning to the group around Diane Lawson, seamlessly rejoining their conversation. I stood alone for several moments, the gift still clutched in my hands, watching my son laugh at something Diane said, her hand once again resting possessively on his shoulder. As I stood watching Marcus rejoin the group around Diane Lawson, a strange calm settled over me. The initial shock and hurt remained, but something else emerged alongside them. A certainty about what needed to happen next. I had spent over 20 years putting Marcus first. His education, his dreams, his future. In all that time, I had never demanded recognition or gratitude. I had worked quietly in the background, my contribution invisible but essential, like the foundation of a building that no one sees, but without which the entire structure would collapse. Today, that invisibility had been transformed into something worse, a deliberate erasure. Another woman had claimed credit for the life I had sacrificed everything to build. My son had allowed it, had participated in it, had cast me aside like a shabby coat one is embarrassed to be seen wearing. I took a deep breath and straightened my shoulders. The navy dress may have been purchased on sale, but I had chosen it carefully. My hands may have been roughened by years of work, but those hands had cared for Marcus through childhood illnesses, had prepared thousands of meals, had signed countless checks for his education. I walked purposefully back toward the group, the gift box containing my father's watch still in my hands. As I approached, I caught fragments of their conversation, something about summer homes and a medical conference in Vienna. Marcus saw me coming and a flash of alarm crossed his face. He stepped slightly away from the circle, clearly intending to intercept me before I could reach the group. But I wasn't to be deterred. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady and clear as I reached the circle. The conversations paused and all eyes turned toward me. "I apologize for the interruption," I continued, looking directly at Diane Lawson. "But I feel there's been a misunderstanding that needs clarification." Marcus moved to my side, speaking in a low, urgent tone. "Mom, please don't do this." "Not now." I ignored him, addressing the group at large. "My name is Eleanor Burton. I'm not a family friend as you were told. I'm Marcus's mother." A murmur of confusion rippled through the group. Diane Lawson's smile remained fixed, though her eyes hardened slightly. "Marcus has already introduced his mother," said the silver-haired man who'd been listening to Marcus earlier. He gestured toward Diane with a slightly puzzled expression. "No," I said firmly. "Diane Lawson is Marcus's professor and mentor. I am his mother. I gave birth to him. I raised him alone after his father left when he was 4 years old." Marcus put his hand on my arm. "Mom, you're embarrassing yourself. These people don't need to hear about our personal history." I gently removed his hand. "I think they do, Marcus. I think they should know the truth." I turned back to the group, who were now watching with uncomfortable fascination. For 25 years, I have been Marcus's only parent. For the past 8 years, I have worked 3 jobs simultaneously to put him through college and medical school. I've been a waitress at Linden Diner, a housekeeper for several families in the county, and a nurse's aide at Riverside Nursing Home. The distinguished man beside Diane Lawson, presumably her husband, shifted uncomfortably. "This is hardly the venue for." "I refinanced my home to pay for his medical school applications," I continued steadily. "I've worked 80-hour weeks, developed arthritis and COPD, been hospitalized for exhaustion, all to ensure that Marcus could become the doctor he is today." "Eleanor," Diane interjected smoothly, "no one is questioning your contribution, but Marcus and I have developed a special mentoring relationship that goes beyond academics. I've guided his professional development, introduced him to the right people, shown him how to navigate the medical community. And that's valuable," I acknowledged. "But it doesn't make you his mother." "Mom, that's enough," Marcus hissed. "You're ruining everything." I looked at my son, really looked at him, and spoke the truth that had been building inside me. I'm not asking for gratitude, Marcus. I've never expected that. All I've ever wanted was for you to have opportunities one couldn't have. But I will not stand here and let you deny who I am, who we are, where we come from. I turned back to the increasingly uncomfortable group. I don't have prestigious connections to offer. I can't host receptions or introduce Marcus to hospital directors. But every dollar of his tuition, every textbook, every meal plan and housing fee came from the work of my hands. Diane stepped forward, her composure slightly cracked. I think you're overreacting. No one has denied your financial contribution. But surely you understand that in professional circles, connections and social. What I understand, I interrupted, my voice still calm but firm, is that my son was ashamed to acknowledge me as his mother today. And what I won't do is pretend that didn't happen. The elegant woman who had first asked about Diane looked at Marcus with new eyes. Is this true? This woman paid your way through medical school by working 3 jobs. Marcus flushed, looking trapped between worlds. It's complicated, he began, but the woman cut him off. It doesn't sound complicated to me. It sounds like you owe her everything. Other members of the group were now looking at Marcus with expressions ranging from disappointment to outright disapproval. The story of a mother working multiple jobs to put her son through medical school was resonating in a way that Marcus clearly hadn't anticipated. Diane attempted to salvage the situation. I think we're all getting emotional. This is Marcus's special day and… Yes, it is, I agreed. And I came here so proud to see my son become Dr. Marcus Burton. I've dreamed of this day since he first mentioned wanting to be a doctor in 6th grade. I opened the gift box in my hands, removing the gold watch inside. This was your grandfather's watch, Marcus. The only valuable thing my father owned. I had it cleaned in service for you. I was going to give it to you as a graduation gift, but I think perhaps you're not ready for it. Marcus stared at the watch, recognition dawning in his eyes. He had always admired it as a child, asking to wear it on special occasions. You taught me something important today, I continued, replacing the watch in its box. You showed me that I've been defining myself solely as your mother for so many years that I've forgotten who Eleanor Burton is. It's time I remembered. I looked around the circle one last time. I won't apologize for where we come from, Marcus. That humble background gave you the drive and determination to succeed. I won't apologize for the work I've done, because honest work is never shameful. And I won't pretend to be someone I'm not, even if that would be more convenient for your career aspirations. With that, I turned and began walking away. Behind me, I heard Marcus call, "Mom, wait." But I continued walking, head held high despite the tears that had begun to fall. I had almost reached the exit when I heard running footsteps behind me. Marcus caught up, his face flushed and eyes wide with something like panic. "You can't just leave like this," he said, reaching for my arm. I stopped and faced him. "I can and I am. For once, I'm putting myself first. You've humiliated me in front of everyone who matters for my career," he said, his voice a mixture of anger and disbelief. "No, Marcus. You humiliated yourself when you denied your mother and your history. The truth is never something to be ashamed of." His expression shifted, calculation replacing anger. "Look, I'll make this right. I'll explain to everyone. Just come back in." "I'm not coming back," I said gently but firmly. "Not today. Maybe not for a while. I need time to think about what our relationship means going forward." "What does that mean?" he asked, suddenly sounding young and uncertain. "It means I need to figure out who I am beyond being your mother. And you need to figure out who you really are and what values matter to you." I reached up and touched his cheek briefly. "Congratulations on becoming a doctor, Marcus. Despite everything, I am truly proud of that achievement." Then I turned and walked away, leaving my son standing alone with the consequences of his choices. As I pushed through the heavy doors into the sunshine, I felt lighter somehow, as if I had set down a burden I hadn't realized I was carrying. The tears continued to fall as I walked toward the bus stop, but they weren't entirely tears of sadness. Some were tears of release, of recognition, of a strange new freedom. For the first time in 25 years, I was thinking about what Eleanor wanted, what Eleanor needed, what Eleanor might become. The bus ride home from Whitmore Medical School was a blur of conflicting emotions. Hurt and betrayal warred with a strange sense of liberation. I had spoken my truth after years of silent sacrifice. The cost had been high, perhaps the permanent fracturing of my relationship with my only child, but the weight that had lifted from my shoulders was undeniable. My small apartment seemed emptier than usual when I returned. I changed out of the navy dress, hanging it carefully in the closet, though I wasn't sure I'd ever wear it again. The memory attached to it was too painful. That night, I sat in my quiet living room and allowed myself to truly feel the day's events. I cried until no more tears would come, grieving not just for the day's humiliation, but for the years of increasing distance, the slow erosion of the close relationship Marcus and I had once shared. The following days brought a heavy silence. No call from Marcus, no text, no email. I returned to my work routine, though something fundamental had shifted. When my supervisor at the nursing home asked if I wanted extra shifts, I declined for the first time in years. When the diner owner mentioned extending my hours, I politely refused. "Are you feeling all right, Eleanor?" he asked, concerned by this deviation from my usual eagerness for additional work. "I'm figuring that out," I replied honestly. A week after graduation, I visited the community college that I drove past every day on my way to the diner. I'd noticed their sign advertising summer enrollment, but had never given it serious thought. This time, I went inside and collected a course catalog. That evening, I browsed through class offerings, considering possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to contemplate in decades. 2 weeks passed without contact from Marcus. I worked my regular shifts but began declining extra hours, using the time instead to rest, read books from the public library, and consider what I wanted for my remaining years. I was only 65, not young certainly, but not as old as I sometimes felt after years of overwork. With proper rest and medical care, I might have 20 good years ahead. What did I want to do with them? The unexpected call came nearly 3 weeks after graduation. I was resting between shifts when my cell phone rang, displaying a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Eleanor Burton?" asked a female voice when I answered. "Yes, it is. My name is Rebecca Chen. I was a classmate of Marcus's at medical school." My heart stuttered. Had something happened to Marcus? "Is everything all right?" I asked, fear tightening my throat. "Yes, I'm sorry to worry you. Marcus is fine, physically at least." She paused. I was at graduation. I saw what happened with the Lawsons. I closed my eyes, embarrassment washing over me anew. "I see. No, please, that's not why I'm calling. I wanted you to know that what you did. It meant something. To a lot of us. This was unexpected. I don't understand." Rebecca's voice grew more confident. "Many of us come from backgrounds like yours and Marcus's. Working-class families, first-generation college students, people who worked multiple jobs to get through school. We've all felt the pressure to reinvent ourselves, to pretend we came from more privileged circumstances." I listened, surprised by her candor. "Seeing you stand up and tell the truth was powerful," she continued. "It's made a lot of us reflect on our own authenticity and the people who sacrifice for us." "Thank you for telling me that," I said, deeply moved by her words. "There's something else you should know," Rebecca added. "Marcus's story has unraveled among our peer group. Several professors have heard what happened and let's just say they're not impressed with his judgment." "I never wanted to hurt his career prospects," I said quickly. "That wasn't my intention." "I know that. But character and integrity matter in medicine. The way we treat people matters." She paused. "And Diane Lawson has distanced herself from him since the incident. Apparently, she's very image-conscious, and this reflected poorly on her judgment as well." After thanking Rebecca for her call, I sat quietly processing this new information. I hadn't intended to create professional consequences for Marcus, but I couldn't regret speaking the truth. Perhaps this was a necessary lesson, painful though it might be. The following day, I enrolled in 2 summer courses at the community college, an introductory computer class and a literature course I'd been eyeing. The cost was manageable if I continued my regular work schedule without overtime, and classes were in the evenings after my diner shift. 3 months after graduation, a letter arrived from Marcus. I recognized his handwriting on the envelope and sat with it unopened for several hours, gathering courage. When I finally read it, his words were tentative, the confident voice of Dr. Marcus Burton replaced by something more reminiscent of the son I had raised. "Dear Mom," he began, already a significant change from the Eleanor he had called me at graduation. "I've started this letter a dozen times over the past weeks, never finding the right words. Maybe there aren't right words for what I need to say." He wrote about the aftermath of graduation day, how Diane Lawson had indeed distanced herself once his fabricated background was exposed, how several of his classmates had confronted him about his treatment of me, how the prestigious residency position he'd been virtually promised had suddenly become unavailable. "I deserved all of it," he admitted. "I betrayed the person who sacrificed everything for me, and I did it for social advancement and professional connections that proved as shallow as my behavior." He described the soul-searching he'd been forced to undertake, the recognition of how far he had strayed from the values I had instilled in him. "I became so focused on where I wanted to go that I grew ashamed of where I came from. In doing so, I denied the very foundation that made my achievements possible." The letter wasn't a request for forgiveness, he emphasized. "I don't expect or deserve immediate forgiveness. What I did was unforgivable. But I want you to know that I see it now, all of it. The countless sacrifices, the years of exhausting work, the dreams you deferred so mine could flourish. I see it, and I am overwhelmed with shame at how I repaid your devotion." He closed by saying he would understand if I never wanted to speak to him again, but hoped that someday we might begin rebuilding what his arrogance and insecurity had damaged. I read the letter several times before composing a response. My reply was neither a wholesale rejection nor an easy absolution. I acknowledged his apology and expressed appreciation for his recognition of the harm done, but I also established boundaries. I needed time. Rebuilding trust would be a gradual process, not an immediate reconciliation. "I am discovering who Eleanor is beyond being Marcus's mother," I wrote. "That journey is important to me, and I need space to continue it." Over the following months, our communication resumed cautiously. Short letters became occasional phone calls. I learned that Marcus had accepted a residency position at a community hospital in an underserved area. Not the prestigious urban medical center he had once targeted, but a place where his skills were desperately needed. "The pay is lower and the hours are brutal," he told me during one call, "but the work feels meaningful in a way I didn't expect." I continued my community college courses, discovering an aptitude for literature that surprised and delighted me. I reduced my workload to 2 jobs instead of 3, prioritizing my health for the first time in decades. The chronic cough improved with proper medical treatment, and I began taking short walks in the park near my apartment, building strength gradually. A year after the graduation day confrontation, Marcus asked if he could visit. I agreed with some trepidation, unsure how we would navigate being in the same space after everything that had transpired. He arrived looking both more mature and somehow younger than he had at graduation. The expensive clothes and affected manner were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a button-down shirt, and a demeanor that reminded me of the earnest boy who had once dreamed of helping people through medicine. Our conversation was initially awkward, both of us careful with our words. But as the evening progressed, the tension gradually eased. Marcus asked about my classes, listening with genuine interest to my thoughts on the literature I was studying. I inquired about his residency, and he shared stories of patients who had touched him, challenges that had humbled him. "I've been volunteering at a free clinic on weekends," he told me over dinner. "Most of the patients are working multiple jobs without health insurance, like you did all those years." I nodded, seeing the connection he was making. "They remind me every week where I come from, who helped me get here." He hesitated. "I tell them about my mom sometimes, how she worked 3 jobs to put me through school. They understand that kind of sacrifice." Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them away. "I'm glad you found meaningful work." Before leaving, Marcus asked if I would consider visiting the community hospital where he worked. "I'd like to introduce you to my colleagues, as my mother," Properly this time. 6 weeks later I made that visit. Walking through the hospital corridors beside Marcus, I felt a complicated mixture of emotions. Pride in the capable physician he had become, lingering hurt from his previous rejection, cautious hope for our rebuilding relationship. When we reached the staff lounge, several doctors and nurses were gathered for a brief lunch break. Marcus cleared his throat to get their attention. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet someone special," he said, his voice clear and firm. "This is my mother, Eleanor Burton. Without her sacrifices and support, I wouldn't be standing here today." The simple introduction, so different from the graduation day denial, brought tears to my eyes. It wasn't a dramatic moment, just a son acknowledging his mother with pride and gratitude. But in its quiet way, it represented healing that once seemed impossible. Our relationship continued to evolve in the years that followed. Marcus eventually married Rebecca, the classmate who had reached out to me after graduation. They settled in the community where he worked, committed to providing medical care to underserved populations. I completed an associate's degree and found part-time work as a library assistant, finally leaving behind the physically demanding jobs that had supported us for so many years. I joined a writing group for seniors, discovering a talent for storytelling I never knew I possessed. We will never recapture the uncomplicated closeness of those early years when it was just us against the world. Too much has happened, too many harsh words exchanged, too many hurtful choices made. But we have found a new relationship built on more honest foundations: mutual respect, appreciation for each other's journeys, and the recognition that even the deepest wounds can heal with time and truth. The greatest lesson from that painful graduation day wasn't about Marcus's betrayal or even my public stand. It was the discovery that at 65, I still had the capacity to redefine myself, to pursue new dreams, to demand the truth even when it cost me dearly. By standing up for my dignity that day, I taught my son something important, but more significantly, I taught myself. Have you ever had to stand up for your truth even when it was painful? Or found yourself starting a new chapter later in life? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else facing a similar crossroads. And if this resonated with you, please subscribe for more stories about finding strength and dignity in life's most challenging moments. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to reclaim your voice and your worth.